The old veteran's hands shook as he ladled the soup into a wooden bowl, not from age but from the weight of memory, because 15 years of war had taught him that some hungers could never be filled by bread alone. The winter evening pressed cold against the shutters of his small farmhouse at the forest's edge, and he had just sat down to eat when he heard the scraping sound outside his door, faint, desperate, like something trying very hard not to be heard. Daniel Graves set down his spoon and reached for the sword that still hung by the door, habit from years on the frontier where orcs and humans had clashed over territory that neither side would surrender. His hand hovered over the worn leather grip, then fell away. The war had ended 3 years ago. He was done with killing. When he opened the door, he found her huddled against the stone foundation of his house, a slip of a thing with skin the color of spring moss and eyes too large for her gaunt face. An orc child, no more than 7 or 8 years old, wearing rags that barely kept out the cold. Her small tusks jutted from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears were pressed flat against her skull in fear or cold or both. "Please," she whispered in the common tongue, her voice cracking. "Please, I will go. I am sorry. I am so hungry." Daniel had killed orcs during the war. He had watched his brother die at the hands of an orc raider. He had every reason to close the door and let the winter do what war could not. Instead, he went back inside, filled his own bowl with the thick vegetable soup he had made, grabbed a blanket from his bed, and returned to the doorway. The girl had not moved. She stared at him with those enormous amber eyes, waiting for violence that he would not deliver. "Here," he said, crouching down to her level and holding out the bowl and blanket. "Eat, it is still hot." She did not take it at first. Her hands remained wrapped around herself, trembling. "I will not hurt you," Daniel said quietly. "You are a child. Children should not go hungry, no matter who their parents were." "My parents are dead," she whispered. "Humans killed them when they would not leave the forest. I have been alone for many days." Something cracked in Daniel's chest, some wall he had built between himself and the world. He set the bowl down on the ground between them and stepped back, giving her space. "Then eat. No strings, no price, just soup for someone who needs it." She lunged forward and grabbed the bowl with both hands, drinking directly from the rim because she was too hungry for manners. The soup scalded her mouth. He could see her flinch, but she did not stop until the bowl was empty. When she finally lowered it, broth dripping from her chin, she looked at him with something like wonder. "Why?" she asked. "Because I remember being hungry," Daniel said, "and because the war is over." He went back inside and made her another bowl, this time adding extra bread and a piece of salt pork. She ate that too, more slowly, wrapped in his blanket while he stood in the doorway watching the tree line. If her clan was looking for her, they might see this as kidnapping. If human villagers saw her here, they would demand he turn her away or worse. But the night remained quiet except for the wind. "What is your name?" he asked when she had finished the second bowl. "Mara Blackridge," she said, the clan name unfamiliar to him. "Thank you for the food. I should go now before someone sees me and hurts you." "Where will you go?" She did not answer, which was answer enough. There was nowhere for a lone orc child in human territory, and her own people had apparently cast her out or died. Daniel made a decision that would change everything. "You can sleep in the barn tonight. It is warmer than the forest. There is hay, and I will bring you another blanket. In the morning you can go or stay, your choice." Mara stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He led her to the barn behind his house, showed her where the clean hay was stacked, and brought her 2 more blankets and a pillow that had belonged to his brother. She made a nest in the corner, her movements quick and efficient like a wild animal preparing a den. "Mara," he said before leaving. "I mean what I said. You are safe here." She pulled the blankets up to her chin. "Why are you kind? I am Orc, you are human, we are supposed to hate." "Hate is taught," Daniel said, "and I am tired of learning that lesson. Sleep well." He left her there and returned to his cold house, where his own soup had gone lukewarm in the bowl. He ate it anyway, tasting nothing, wondering what he had just invited into his life. Morning came with fresh snow and the smell of the small fire he had started in his hearth. Daniel cooked porridge and eggs, made enough for two without really thinking about it, and carried a plate out to the barn. Mara was awake, the blankets folded neatly in a stack, and she was using a stick to draw pictures in the dirt floor of the barn, images of forests and mountains, places he had never seen. "I made breakfast," he said, holding out the plate. She took it carefully, as if expecting it to be snatched away. "You did not have to, I know, but I did anyway." He leaned against the barn door. "What will you do today?" "I will leave," Mara said quietly. "You have been kind, but I cannot stay. Your neighbors will come. They will hurt you for helping me. My nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, and he minds his own business." Daniel crossed his arms. "You could stay a few days, until you are stronger. There is work here, feeding the chickens, helping with the animals. I could use the help, and you could use the food and rest." "Why would you do this?" Mara's voice rose, confusion and distrust warring in her expression. "I do not understand humans. You killed my parents and now you feed me. What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Daniel said, and he realized it was true. "I want nothing from you, Mara. I am just trying to be better than the man the war made me, and maybe giving soup to a hungry child is where that starts." She searched his face for the lie and did not find it. Finally, she nodded. 3 days. "I will stay 3 days and then I go." 3 days became a week. A week became a month. Winter deepened, and Mara proved herself useful and quiet and smarter than any child he had ever known. She learned the names of all his animals within a day: the chickens, the 2 goats, the old plow horse named Rust. She fixed the door on the chicken coop that had been hanging crooked for a year. She asked questions about everything: why he planted certain crops, how the well worked, what the mountains looked like beyond the forest. Daniel taught her to read using his brother's old books. He taught her to cook properly, to mend clothes, to split wood. She taught him Orc words in return, the language harsh and guttural but beautiful in its precision. She told him stories of her people, of their honor codes and their connection to the land, things the human generals had never bothered to learn. "My mother said humans were cowards who hide behind walls," Mara said one evening as they sat by the fire, her reading lesson finished for the day. "But you are not a coward. You opened your door." "Opening a door is easy," Daniel said. "Keeping it open is the hard part." Spring came slowly, melting the snow into mud and coaxing green shoots from the earth. Mara had grown during the winter, not much, but enough that his brother's old shirt that he had given her was starting to fit better. She smiled more often now, especially when the goats did something foolish or when Rust begged for apples. "I should go," Mara said one morning in early spring, but her voice held no conviction. "You could stay," Daniel replied. "If you want to. The other humans will come eventually. Your friends, your family." "I have no family left, and my friends know better than to show up uninvited." "What if my people come? What if they think you took me?" Daniel considered this. It was a real danger. But looking at Mara, at the child who had been starving and terrified, and was now healthy and happy, he could not bring himself to send her away. "Then we will explain," he said. "Together." She stayed. Years passed like seasons, each one bringing changes that Daniel barely noticed until they had already happened. Mara shot up in height, growing tall and strong. She could outwork him in the fields by the time she was 12. her orc strength manifesting as she matured. She learned to use tools with precision, to barter with the traveling merchants who sometimes passed through, to make medicines from forest herbs her mother had taught her about in the years before everything fell apart. The nearby villagers learned about her eventually, of course. There was talk, some of it angry, some of it fearful. But Daniel had been a respected soldier, and he made it clear that anyone who threatened Mara would answer to him. After the first year, they stopped complaining. After the second, they started asking her for help when someone was sick or injured, because orc medicine was often more effective than what the human healers provided. By the time Mara was 16, she was more a part of his life than anyone had ever been, including his lost brother. They worked the farm together, cooked together, sat by the fire on winter evenings and talked about everything and nothing. Daniel taught her to fight not with rage like the war had taught him, but with discipline and skill, so she could protect herself if she ever needed to. She taught him to see the forest as her people did, as a living thing worthy of respect rather than fear. "I want to see the capital," Mara said one summer evening when she was 17. "I want to see more of the world than this farm and this forest." Daniel felt something twist in his chest. "You should go," he said, meaning it and hating it at the same time. "You should see everything you can." "Will you come with me? I am getting old, Mara. My traveling days are behind me." She laughed at that, the sound bright and unguarded. "You are 38. That is not old." "It feels old some mornings." "Then we will go in the spring," she said decisively. "When the roads are good and your old bones will not complain so much." But spring came with complications. A messenger arrived from the southern territories, carrying news that orc clans were gathering near the border. There was talk of new conflicts, of old wounds reopening. The messenger looked at Mara with suspicion and distrust, and Daniel sent him away with sharp words and a warning not to return. "It is starting again," Mara said quietly after the messenger left. "The hate, the fear." "Not here," Daniel said firmly, "not on this farm, but everywhere else." She turned to him, her amber eyes troubled. "Daniel, what if they force all orcs to leave human lands? What if they make laws?" "Then we will deal with it when it happens." But she was restless after that, nervous in a way he had not seen since she was a child. She took long walks in the forest, sometimes not returning until after dark. She spoke less, smiled less. Daniel wanted to help her but did not know how to fight the weight of the world's prejudice. One morning in late summer, a month after she turned 18, Mara came to him in the field where he was checking the wheat. "I need to go," she said without preamble. "Back to the orc lands. To find my people." Daniel's hand stilled on the wheat stalks. "Why?" "Because I do not know who I am. I am orc, but I have lived with humans. I have forgotten so much of my people's ways. I need to find where I belong before I can figure out what comes next." Every part of him wanted to tell her not to go, to stay where it was safe, where he could protect her. But he had never owned her, never tried to keep her anywhere she did not want to be. "How long will you be gone?" "I do not know. A season, maybe more." He nodded slowly, his throat tight. "Then go, but Mara, this will always be home, always, no matter what you find out there." She hugged him then, fierce and sudden, her strong arms nearly crushing his ribs. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for the soup, for the door you opened, for seeing me instead of what I am." "You are Mara," Daniel said, returning the embrace. "That is all you have ever been. That is all that matters." She left the next morning with a pack of supplies, a good knife, and the old blanket he had given her that first night. Daniel stood in the doorway and watched her walk toward the forest, her dark hair braided back, her shoulders straight and strong. She turned once at the tree line, raised her hand in farewell, and then she was gone. The farm felt emptier than it ever had, even in the years before she came. Daniel threw himself into work, repairing everything that needed repairing and several things that did not. He cooked meals for one and ate them without tasting. He slept poorly, waking to every sound, half expecting to hear her voice or her footsteps on the floorboards. Summer faded into autumn. Autumn gave way to winter. No word came from Mara, and Daniel tried not to imagine all the terrible things that could happen to a young orc woman traveling alone through territories where her kind was not welcome. He told himself she was strong, smart, capable. He told himself she would come back when she was ready. Winter passed in a blur of snow and silence. Spring arrived with mud and rain, and still no Mara. Daniel planted the fields alone, talking to Rust and the goats as if they could fill the void her absence had created. The traveling merchants asked about her, and he said she was visiting family, which was not quite a lie. It was early summer, a year and a few weeks since she had left, when he heard the sound of hoofbeats on the road. Daniel was in the garden pulling weeds, his hands dirty and his back aching, when he looked up to see a rider approaching on a massive gray horse that looked more war horse than traveling mount. The rider was an orc woman, tall and powerful, wearing leather armor decorated with intricate patterns and carrying herself with a warrior's confidence. She had green skin a shade darker than spring moss, small tusks that gleamed white in the sunlight, and amber eyes that struck him like lightning. It took him a moment to recognize her, another moment to believe it. Mara. She dismounted in one fluid motion, landing lightly despite her size. She had grown even taller, filled out with muscle and presence. Her dark hair was adorned with beads and feathers, orc traditional markings he did not recognize. She wore the clothing and bearing of a warrior, but her eyes, those were still hers, still warm despite everything. "Hello, Daniel," she said, and her voice was deeper now, richer, the voice of a woman rather than the girl who had left. He stood slowly, his knees protesting, suddenly aware of the gray in his beard and the lines around his eyes. "You came back. I said I would. You said a season. It has been a year. I know, I am sorry. It took longer than I expected to find my people and to learn what I needed to learn." She took a step closer. "But I am back now, if you will have me." "Have you?" Daniel's voice came out rough. "Mara, this is your home. You are always welcome here." "That is good," she said, and something in her expression shifted, became more vulnerable beneath the warrior's confidence. "Because I need to tell you something. I need to tell you why I really came back." His heart hammered against his ribs. "All right." "I found my clan," Mara began, her words measured and careful. "What remains of them? They accepted me, taught me our ways, our traditions. I learned to fight properly, to honor the old gods, to understand what it means to be orc. They offered me a place with them. A full place as a warrior and a member of the clan." "That is good," Daniel managed. "That is what you wanted." "It was," she agreed. "But the whole time I was with them, learning and training and belonging, all I could think about was here, this farm, the chickens and Rust and the goats. The way the wheat looks in the morning sun, the way you hum when you cook even though you do not realize you are doing it." She paused, her tusks catching the light as she struggled with words. "All I could think about was you." Daniel's breath caught. "Mara, let me finish," she said quickly. "Please. I need to say this. When I was with my people, they talked about honor and strength and tradition. They talked about finding mates within the clan, continuing bloodlines, keeping orc ways pure. And I understood that, respected it even. But none of the warriors they introduced me to made me feel anything except polite. None of them made me feel the way I feel when I think about coming home to you." She took another step closer, close enough that he could see the way her hands trembled slightly at her sides, the only sign of nerves in her otherwise confident stance. I am Orc, Mara continued. And you are human. The world will not understand. Both our peoples will call it wrong, unnatural, shameful. But Daniel, you were the first person who ever showed me kindness. You fed me when I was starving. You gave me shelter when I was alone. You taught me and protected me and never asked for anything in return. You saw me as a person when everyone else saw me as a monster. You were never a monster, Daniel said hoarsely. I know that now, because you showed me. Her amber eyes held his, unflinching. I am 18 now, a grown woman by Orc and human standards. I have seen the world beyond this farm. I have met warriors and hunters and merchants and scholars. And none of them, not a single one, has your kindness or your strength or your heart. So I came back to tell you something, and if you do not feel the same way, I will leave and never speak of it again. But I have to try because the alternative is living the rest of my life wondering what might have been. What are you saying? Daniel asked, though his heart already knew, had perhaps known for years without daring to acknowledge it. I am saying that I love you, Mara said, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. Not as a child loves a guardian or a student loves a teacher. I love you as a woman loves a man, and I came back to ask if you would let me stay. Not as your ward or your helper, but as something more. As a partner. As, she faltered for the first time, as your wife, if you would have me. The world seemed to stop spinning. Daniel stood in his garden with dirt under his fingernails and his heart hammering in his chest, staring at this incredible woman who had once been a starving child at his door. He thought about the years they had spent together, the comfortable silence and easy companionship. He thought about the emptiness of the past year without her. He thought about the way his heart had broken when she left, and the way it was piecing itself back together now that she had returned. I am 20 years older than you, he said, grasping for reasons even as his heart screamed at him to just accept what was being offered. So, orcs live longer than humans anyway. We will balance out. The villagers will talk. They might do worse than talk. Let them. I can handle villagers. Your people might cast you out for choosing a human. They already told me that might happen. I chose this anyway. I chose you. She moved closer, close enough that he could smell the leather of her armor and the forest scent that always clung to her. Daniel, I know all the reasons why this is difficult. I know all the ways this could go wrong. But the only thing I cannot accept is not trying. So tell me, true, do you feel anything for me? Or am I alone in this? He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the woman she had become and remembering the girl she had been. Somewhere along the way, between teaching her to read and working the fields together and sitting by the fire on cold nights, his feelings had shifted from protectiveness to something deeper, something he had buried because she was young and because it seemed impossible and because he was afraid. You are not alone, Daniel said quietly. God help me, Mara, you are not alone. I have loved you for longer than I wanted to admit. But you were young and I was supposed to be taking care of you, not this. I am not young anymore, Mara said. I am a woman making a choice, and I choose you. I choose this farm and this life and this love if you will let me. He reached for her then, his calloused farmer's hands cupping her face, feeling the warmth of her green skin beneath his palms. It will not be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. People will judge us, hate us maybe. Then we will face it together. I am set in my ways, I snore. I hum when I cook apparently. She laughed, the sound bright and free. I know all your flaws already, old man. You think a year away would make me forget. Then yes, Daniel said, the word feeling like freedom and promise and coming home all at once. Yes, Mara Blackridge, I will marry you. I will spend whatever years I have left making you happy and standing by your side and thanking whatever power brought you to my door that cold night. She kissed him then, her tusks pressing gently against his face, her lips warm and soft and tasting like coming home after a long journey. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling the solid strength of her, the realness of her, and knew that nothing would ever be the same, and that was exactly how it should be. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "We should do it properly," Mara said. "I want a real wedding, with witnesses. I want the whole village to know that I am choosing you and you are choosing me." "They will not come," Daniel warned. "Most of them anyway. Some will, the ones who matter, and those who do not come will learn to live with it or stay away." He laughed, amazed at her confidence, at her certainty. "When did you become so fearless?" "I was always fearless. You just taught me to direct it properly." They planned the wedding for a month later, giving time for word to spread and for Daniel to make the farm presentable. Mara moved back into the house, though they maintained propriety, and she took the small bedroom that had once been his brother's. She helped him repair the fence, plant the last of the summer crops, and compose a simple announcement to be carried to the surrounding farms and villages. The responses varied. Some neighbors sent polite refusals, making excuses about harvest work or family obligations. Others sent no response at all, but a few, a precious few, sent messages of support or curiosity or cautious acceptance. The old merchant who had traded with them for years sent word that he would attend and bring proper wine. A widow from the next farm over whom Mara had once helped through a difficult illness said she would come and bring witnesses. The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright, summer sun warming the earth and making everything glow. They had decided to hold the ceremony outside, in the field behind the house where wild flowers grew in blue and yellow profusion. Daniel wore his one good shirt, cleaned and mended. Mara wore a dress she had sewn herself from green fabric that matched her skin, decorated with orc symbols of loyalty and love stitched in gold thread. The traveling merchant arrived first, a grizzled old man named Tomas, who had been trading on the frontier for 40 years and claimed to have seen everything. He clapped Daniel on the shoulder and told him he was either the bravest or the stupidest man alive, and that either way he respected the choice. The widow, Ellen Graves, came next with her 2 grown sons. No relation to Daniel, despite the shared surname, but she had always been kind in her quiet way. She embraced Mara and whispered something that made the young orc woman's eyes shine with tears. 3 more families came, farmers who had lived on the frontier long enough to value character over species. They brought bread and cheese and small gifts, tokens of acceptance that meant more than gold. When it became clear that no one else would arrive, that they would have a wedding of perhaps 15 people instead of the dozens that might have attended a normal ceremony, Mara took Daniel's hand and squeezed it. "This is enough," she said. "These people, this moment, this is enough." They had asked the merchant Tomas to officiate, as he was the closest thing to neutral authority available. He stood before them with a battered book of frontier vows, his voice carrying across the field as he asked the questions that had been asked at 1,000 weddings. "Daniel Graves, do you take this woman, Mara Blackridge, to be your wife? To stand beside her in good times and bad, in sickness and health, in a world that may not understand but cannot break what you build together?" "I do," Daniel said, his voice steady. "Mara Blackridge, do you take this man, Daniel Graves, to be your husband? To stand beside him in good times and bad, in sickness and health, in a world that may not understand but cannot break what you build together?" "I do," Mara said, her tusks gleaming as she smiled. "Then by the authority vested in me by common frontier law and the witness of those gathered, I declare you married. May your home be filled with joy, your fields be fruitful, and your love endure until the stars grow cold." Daniel kissed his wife for the second time, this time before witnesses, this time as a promise sealed before the world. The small crowd cheered, and Ellen's sons broke out instruments and began to play. And what followed was not a grand celebration, but something better, an honest one, full of laughter and music and people who had chosen to see love instead of difference. As the sun set and the guests began to depart, promising to visit again and to spread the word that the marriage was real and recognized, Daniel and Mara stood together in the field where they had spoken their vows. "You regret it?" Daniel asked, watching the last wagon disappear down the road. The small ceremony, the few guests. "Not even a little," Mara said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I would rather have 15 people who truly support us than 100 who came out of obligation. What will we do when the opposition comes? Because it will come, Mara. There will be those who cannot accept this. Then we will face them," she said simply. "Together, the way we face everything else, with courage and honesty and the knowledge that what we have is worth fighting for." He turned to her, this amazing woman who had ridden back across half the territory to choose him, who had stood before the world and claimed him as hers. "I gave you soup once, just simple soup because you were hungry. How did that become this?" "Because kindness is never simple," Mara said. "Because you saw a hungry child instead of an enemy. Because you opened your door and your heart and taught me that the world could be better than the stories said. That soup was not just food, Daniel. It was hope. And I carried that hope with me for 11 years until I was old enough and brave enough to come back and claim the man who gave it to me." "I am glad you came back," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am glad you rode all this way. I am glad you chose me. Always," Mara promised. "Through whatever comes, I choose you, today and every day after." They walked back to the house together as the stars began to emerge, husband and wife, human and orc, two people who had found each other across the divide of prejudice and fear. The farm would continue its work. The seasons would change. Challenges would come, because they always did. But they would face everything together, built on a foundation of soup given freely and returned with a love that could not be broken. Inside the house, Mara hung her warrior's armor on the wall beside Daniel's old sword, symbols of lives lived before hanging together in peace. She helped him bank the fire, wash the dishes from the wedding feast, prepare the house for sleep. Every small domestic act felt sacred now, blessed by the vows they had spoken and the choice they had made. "What do you think your brother would have said?" Mara asked suddenly as they worked. "About us, I mean." Daniel paused, considering. His brother had died hating orcs, killed by one in the last days of the war. But he had also been a man who believed in second chances, who had taught Daniel to see the good in people before the bad. "I think he would have been angry at first," Daniel said honestly. "But I also think he would have come around eventually. He would have seen how you fixed that chicken coop he always meant to repair. He would have heard you laugh. He would have known that you make me happier than I have been in 20 years. And he would have accepted it, because that is who he was underneath the anger the war gave him." "I wish I could have met him," Mara said softly. "In a way, you did. That pillow I gave you the first night was his. The books I taught you to read from were his. His spirit was in this house long after he died, and he would be glad that it helped keep you safe." They finished the evening tasks and climbed the stairs together, no longer maintaining separate rooms, no longer pretending that their hearts belonged anywhere but together. The bedroom was simple, just a bed and a chest and a window that looked out over the fields, but it was theirs now, a shared space for a shared life. Mara stood by the window, looking out at the land bathed in moonlight. "Do you know what I thought about most when I was with my clan?" she asked. It was not the big things. It was the small ones. The way you always feed the chickens at exactly the same time every morning. The way Rust whickers when he hears your voice. The way the house smells like bread when you bake. I miss the life we built here more than I can say. Daniel came to stand beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. And now you do not have to miss it anymore. Now you are home. Now I am home, she agreed, turning to face him, with you, where I belong. That night, they came together not as guardian and ward or even as friends, but as husband and wife, two people choosing each other completely. There was nervousness and laughter and tenderness, learning each other in new ways while building on the foundation of trust they had spent years constructing. And when they finally slept, tangled together in sheets warmed by summer air, it was with the peace of people who had found their place in the world. The weeks that followed brought a new rhythm to the farm. They worked together as they always had. But now, there were stolen kisses in the barn, hands held while walking the property line, comfortable silences that spoke of deep contentment. Mara proved herself not just a partner in labor but in life, handling the complications that arose with wisdom and strength. When a group of young men from the village came to cause trouble one afternoon, drunk on prejudice and moonshine, it was Mara who faced them down without violence. She stood in the road, arms crossed, and told them in a voice like iron that she had chosen her husband and would defend their home with every skill her warrior training had given her if necessary, but that she would prefer to live in peace if they would allow it. The men had left, shamed by her dignity and perhaps a little afraid of the confident warrior standing before them. Word spread after that, and the visit stopped. People might not approve, but they learned to leave the Graves farm alone. Summer gave way to autumn, and they harvested together, filling the barn with hay and the cellar with preserved vegetables. Mara taught Daniel Ork methods of food preservation that kept things fresh longer. He taught her the patterns of frost and weather that his years on the land had ingrained in him. When the first anniversary of their wedding approached, Daniel woke early to make breakfast, planning a simple celebration. He found Mara already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, starting the fire in the stove. "I am thinking about how much has changed," she said. "A year ago I was so nervous standing in that field, wondering if we were making a mistake. Now I cannot imagine any other life than this one. No regrets, not a single one." She stood and came to him, wrapping her arms around him from behind as he worked. "You know what today is besides our anniversary?" "What?" "It is 11 years to the day since you gave me that soup," Mara said softly. 11 years since you opened your door and changed my life. I counted it out last night, November 15th, the same date." Daniel turned in her embrace, genuinely surprised. "I did not realize. I did not remember the exact day." "I did. I remembered every detail of that night, how cold I was, how scared, how certain I was going to die alone in the dark. And then you appeared with soup and a blanket and kindness I did not know existed in the world." Her eyes shimmered. 11 years from starving child to married woman, and every good thing in my life traces back to that moment. He cupped her face in his hands, this woman he loved beyond reason. "That child was worth saving. You were always worth it, Mara. And you were always worth riding back to," she replied. "So here we are. 11 years, 1 year, and hopefully 50 more to come." "I will give you every year I have," Daniel promised. They spent the day together, working less and enjoying more, walking the property line hand in hand and talking about plans for the future. Mara wanted to expand the goat herd. Daniel thought they should add another field for crops. Both agreed that the house could use some repairs before winter truly set in. As evening fell and they prepared dinner together in the kitchen, moving around each other with the ease of long practice, Daniel found himself thinking about paths and choices, about how one small act of kindness could ripple forward through time, creating waves that changed everything, about how opening his door that cold night had seemed like nothing more than basic decency, but had ultimately led to this a full life, a true partnership, a love that made every day brighter. "What are you thinking about now?" Mara asked, catching his expression as she stirred the pot on the stove. "You have that faraway look." "I am thinking about soup," Daniel admitted with a smile. She laughed, bright and free. "Still, after all this time, it was good soup," he said, grinning. "Life-changing soup, apparently." "It was decent soup," Mara corrected, her eyes dancing with humor. "A bit undersalted, if I am being honest, but it was given with love, and that made all the difference. I will try to season better in the future." "You have the rest of our lives to practice," she pointed out, and the casual way she said it, the certainty in her voice that their future was long and secure and together, made his heart swell with gratitude. They ate dinner as the sun set, then sat by the fire as darkness filled the windows. Mara had her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, both of them content in the simple pleasure of being together. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees and carrying the scent of coming winter. Inside, the fire crackled and the house stood solid around them, a home they had built together through patience and work and love. "Daniel," Mara said quietly. "Yes, thank you for everything. For the soup and the blanket and the open door, for seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else, for letting me leave when I needed to and welcoming me back when I returned, for marrying me despite what the world thinks, for this life." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her against his side. "Thank you for coming back. For choosing this life, this farm, me. For being brave enough to ride across half the territory to tell a stubborn old farmer how you felt. For making every day an adventure." "We are quite the pair," Mara observed with amusement. "Human and orc, veteran and orphan, farmer and warrior." "We are perfect," Daniel corrected. "Exactly as we are." She lifted her head to look at him, her amber eyes reflecting firelight. "Yes," she agreed, "we are." Outside, the world continued turning, carrying its prejudices and fears and endless conflicts. But inside the small farmhouse at the forest's edge, two people had found something rare and precious and worth defending. A love built on soup given freely and returned tenfold. A home made not of walls but of choices, kindness, and the courage to open doors even when the world said to keep them closed. Years from that night, when their story became one of the legends told in frontier taverns and border towns, people would argue about the details. Some would say the orc girl had been dying when the human found her. Others would claim she had saved his life rather than the other way around. The particulars would shift and change with each telling, as all stories do, but the heart of it remained true. A man had given soup to a hungry child. That child had grown into a woman who rode back to marry him. And together, they had proven that kindness, when offered freely, could change the world one open door at a time. In the firelight of their home, with years of love still ahead of them, Daniel and Mara held each other close, and knew that they had already won the only battle that truly mattered, the one for a life lived with courage, compassion, and the unshakable certainty that they belonged together. The fire burned low. The night deepened, and in the house where a starving orc child had once been given soup by a kind human veteran, a husband and wife settled into sleep, their hearts full, their future bright, their love unbreakable as stone. This was their happily ever after, hard-won and well-deserved, and it would endure through all the seasons yet to come.